Call this meeting of Lima City Council to order. We'll begin tonight's meeting with the invocation by Councilor Glenn, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we think we all come together today, Lord. Lord, bless every soul here, Lord. Lord, bless our great city of Lima, Ohio, and bless all the city councils. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean.
Here.
Mr. Lowe.
Here.
Mr. Tevin.
Here.
Ms. Adams.
Here.
Mr. Glenn.
Here.
Ms. Townsend.
Here.
And Mr. Nixon.
Here. First on the agenda is Resolution 1612.
A resolution supporting the Lima City Schools' proposed 5.99 mil permanent improvement and operating levy.
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I move that Resolution 1612 be passed on its first reading after having been read.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass Resolution 1612 on its first reading after having been read. I'll have the clerk read the resolution.
Whereas on November 6, 2012, there will be a proposed 5.99 mil permanent improvement and operating tax levy for the Lima City School District on the election ballot. And whereas the purpose of the levy is to provide for permanent improvements and operational expenses of the Lima City Schools District, including updated technology, transportation, building repairs, and preventive maintenance. And whereas the Lima City School District has made numerous reductions to teaching staff and administrative positions in response to cuts in state funding and are operating in an efficient and frugal manner. And whereas this levy is essential to continue to support the quality education being provided to the children enrolled in the Lima City School District and will raise an estimated $1,848,475 per year for a 5-year period. And whereas Council desires to formally support the Lima City School District proposed 5.99 mil permanent improvement and operational tax levy. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Lima, Ohio, a majority of the members elected thereto concurring, Lima City Council finds that the proposed 5.99 permanent improvement and operating tax levy for the Lima City School District is vitally important to the children of Lima and urges the voting citizenry of the City of Lima to vote yes on November 6, 2012.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
I spoke in support of the levy last spring, and I am in support of this attempt at a levy. And I think that the words in the resolution that this levy is vitally important to the children of Lima is very accurate. I know that there are critics of the public education system in the city sometimes, in the state, and in our country. In my mind, these children are the future of our country, and I think that we owe them our support, and we're paying it forward. So I do support it, and I urge all the residents in the city of Lima who are going to vote to support the levy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I just got a couple things, and I can echo a couple of the same words that Mr. Tevin has said, but it's very, very important that our kids have a future. And I always challenge everyone to listen to Whitney Houston about the kids, that we have a future, is our future there. And had an opportunity to talk to a lot of folks and let them know that what we need to do, we need to take our school system to another level there, and we got to have time. We got to have a levy in there at a time. But any negativity, anything, but we need to step up and think about our kids. If you don't have a kid, still think about the kids there, the future of our city school kids here. You know, and there's a lot of kids there, and they're on the right direction. They're on the right people getting on educating our kids. Technology is very, very important. If you guys listen to some of the election, some debates that different people talking about, education is a must. And we need to step up to a new level. And I'm hoping and praying that this levy go through. I know I'm wearing my shirt tonight, and I always support the school levy all the time. You know, I'm blessed all my kids graduated now, but we will continue supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
it's pretty much been said what needs to happen. We are here to support the schools. I'm glad to be a product of the Lima City school system, my children, and I have one in now, well, actually two in now, one at Lima Senior and one at West. It's crucial that we as parents play a role in our children's education and quit trying to shift the blame on what the teacher isn't doing. It's our responsibility. The public schools have been fantastic. We have been able to have great successors come out of the public school system. There was great teachers that I dealt with that had a serious, serious impact on my life. Mrs. Gwynn, Miss Hildred Gwynn, Mr. Fred Weimer, Coach Carver, Mrs. Rush. Good teachers, and there's some good, excellent teachers and counselors in the system, and I ask Lima to please support this levy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Is there any further discussion? I'll yield my time to the superintendent, Bill Ackerman, if you have anything you wanted to say.
Always have something to say. I just want to say that I appreciate your support. We appreciate your support. And this is more than just about technology and transportation and all the things that this levy will give our school district, but this is about a community, which is why we say that we believe in Lima. This is about an entire community that we stand firm about, and we actually have a little thing for you, that complimentary that Ms. Miles is going to give you. But we believe in our community. We serve all students. We transport all kids, public, private, community school kids on our buses. We are able to have beautiful buildings that are no longer new. They're about 10 years old. The newest one's about 10 years old now. But we want to be able to keep them looking fabulous because they are stellar pieces in this community. So we're here to serve you and the entire Lima community, and with the help of this levy, we will be able to do so and provide and continue to provide a great education for our students. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of the entire school district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can only echo what everybody else has said, and, you know, no, I don't have children in the city schools any longer. They're old enough, they've graduated, they moved on. But when I was in school, there was somebody's parents and grandparents paying taxes to support the school that I went to. There were grandparents and parents supporting city schools when my kids went to school. And as Tom said, we're paying it forward. It's our obligation to ensure a quality education for the students that are there now and the basis for the future generations. So I'll be gladly supporting this resolution. I think that, you know, as somebody said, there's criticism at all levels and points, and there's criticism of the city too, okay? And I still believe in the city. But education is a key and a foundation for the future. So I encourage everybody to support the levy and to vote in favor of it.
Mr. President,
Ms. Townsend?
just as a final thought, it's a piece of infrastructure in the community that is, as everybody has said, so important. But we see every day in the newspapers and all around that there's a disconnect between training and education of citizens versus the jobs that are available. And so what I think we've done, I can't believe it's been 10 years for the newest school, but what we've done with the new facilities and the programs that we have and the training available in those schools, I think has brought that disconnect a little, made it a little smaller. So I think with this, we need to keep doing that. We need to keep supporting the schools, and it ain't coming free. So I will support it, as I hope everybody else will, on November the 6th. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. If there's no further discussion, I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper. Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Resolution 1612 has been adopted on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Consent calendar,
Mr. President,
Ms. Townsend?
I move that item A of the consent calendar be received, filed, and approved.
Second.
The motion, the second, is to receive, file, and approve item A under the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 1.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to enter into contracts for CDBG projects.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 1 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 1. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Townsend?
I will be voting on this one.
Pardon me?
I will be voting on this one and not abstaining for the first time.
Very good. Noted. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 2.
From the Director of Community Development regarding legislation to enter into a contract for home projects.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 2 be received and filed, and legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 2. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Townsend? let me
I
guess.
will be abstaining on this one, as well as the ordinances that are connected. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 3.
From the engineer requesting legislation to construct sidewalks.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 3 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 3. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I just wanted to make a special note. The notice originally had 172 locations within the city of sidewalks that needed replaced, and as of the date of this letter, 100 had been taken care of by the homeowner, and 72 have failed to comply. And to those 100, I thank you for your action and for the safety of the residents. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 4.
From the Director of Public Works regarding legislation to advertise and enter into a contract for guardrail replacement project.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that communication number 4 be received and filed. Legislation is on tonight's agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 4. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 5.
From Chief Martin regarding legislation to enter into a contract with Kleeman Property Maintenance.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I move that communication number 5, receive and file legislation on the night agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 5. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 6.
From the Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding a new permit to Laura Allen, DBA The Avalon Bar at 36 Town Square.
Mr. President,
Mr. Lowe?
I move that communication number 6 be received and filed, and the clerk authorized to file with no objections.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 6 and to authorize the clerk to notify the Ohio Division of Liquor Control of no objection. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 7.
From the mayor regarding legislation for the sale of property to Lima Energy Company.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I move that communication number 7, receive and file legislation on the night agenda.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 7. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
The motion carries. Communication number 8.
From Chief Hefner regarding legislation to lease Fire Station Number 4 to LACNet.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that communication number 8 received and filed and placed in the Neighborhood Concern Committee.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive and file communication number 8 and to refer to Council's Neighborhood Concerns Committee. Is there any discussion? Can't write and talk at the same time, folks. Sorry. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. Communication number 9.
There is no 9.
That's because I didn't turn the page. Nobody's ahead of me. Okay. Reports of committees, the Community and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Community and Economic Development Committee met on September 17th at 5:30. The committee members were Councilor Glenn, Councilor McLean, and myself as chairperson. The subject was a continuation discussion of civil penalties and fines concerning code enforcement. All members have received a copy of the minutes that I was able to capture from the minutes, and with that, I move that the committee report be received, filed, and approved.
Second.
The motion and the second is to receive, file, and approve the committee report as submitted by Councilor Adams. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 1412.
Appointing J. Howard Elstro as authorized agent for the purpose of the Federal Emergency Management Association Public Assistance Grant Program.
Mr. President,
Ms. Townsend?
I move that Resolution 1412 be adopted on its first reading.
Second.
The
Be
motion-
adopted. Yeah, sorry.
The motion and the second is to adopt Resolution 1412 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams.
Yes.
Resolution 1412 has been adopted on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Resolution 1512.
Declaring the necessity of constructing certain designated sidewalks and requiring that the abutting property owners construct the same.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that resolution number 1512 be adopted after its first reading.
Second. The motion and the second is to adopt Resolution 1512 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams.
Yes.
Resolution 1512 has been adopted on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 18412.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with HMS Employer Solutions.
Mr. President,
Ms. Townsend?
I move that ordinance 18412 be tabled until our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Second.
The motion and the second is to table ordinance 18412 until October 22nd. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Ordinance 20712.
Authorizing the auditor to make payment to the State of Ohio Environmental Protection Agency.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean?
I move that ordinance 20712 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 20712 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams.
Yes.
Ordinance 20712 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 20812.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with GE Intellect Platforms, Inc. for water and wastewater plant control software.
Mr. President,
Mr. McLean?
I move that ordinance 20812 be passed on its first reading.
Second. The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 20812 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams.
Yes.
Ordinance 208-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 209-12.
Authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the guardrail replacement project, Jameson Avenue and Metcalf Street.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that ordinance 209-12 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 209-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 209-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 210-12.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Cleveland Property Maintenance for the construction of the Safety City Mini Police Building from the Law Enforcement Trust Fund.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that ordinance 210-12 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 210-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 210-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 211-12.
Enacting Section 102211 of the Codified Ordinances of Lima, Ohio to implement a new city sidewalk repair program.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that ordinance 211-12 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 211-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
this ordinance is a result of work done in the committee, Public Works Committee, where the tree root issue had come up and been referred to, and with cooperation of the city and the Public Works Department and of the committee and hopefully council, the new language is in this section and rebate program, and it's up to 25%, and it replaces program authorized in Resolution 1511, and those listings under that resolution are eligible to be reviewed under this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Is there any further discussion? I just want to give credit where it's due, because she won't take it for herself, but Ms. Adams, you are the one who spearheaded this issue and raised the concern that property owners had. And frankly, it's an issue that comes up a lot, if at the very least time to time, but frankly, quite a lot when we do the sidewalk repair program. So I want to give you credit for taking the lead on this and getting it through the committee. I think it's a good compromise, and I think it does provide some adequate relief to those who who experience the citations, but caused by tree roots. So I want to give you credit on that. So
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes?
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 211-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 212-12.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement for the transfer and development of real estate to the Lima Energy Company.
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn.
I move that 212-12, I move that ordinance 212-12 be passed as it's been read. My voice is
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 212-12 on its first reading. I think you meant to say.
Yeah, I meant to say that. Got something.
And I don't want the clerk to have to read
No.
all 8 pages, okay?
Okay.
So the motion and the second is to pass ordinance 212-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Tevin.
looking this ordinance over, the sale of Lime Energy, it references ordinance 222-99, and I was on council back then, and ordinance 17402, and I was not on council then. But hopefully, third time is a charm, and Lime Energy will be very successful. I know that there are a lot of dynamics in the energy industry, and hopefully the timing is right.
Right.
And the project, you know, in my understanding of it, being broken into smaller phases will allow you to, A, move forward, and B, build upon that success. So I support the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
my voice get better here. I've been talking all day. But the great thing I like to see, though, Dwight, you've been there for a long time. As long as I've been on city council, you're still sticking it out. We're talking when you're walking up. But creating jobs, employment opportunity, improving economic development, welfare of the people, the city, increase real estate property, personal property, income tax base in the city. Them some great things there. So I'm just happy. You see, we're still moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Is there any further discussion? I just want to say that I'm glad to see this ordinance coming tonight. I'm glad that you're here, Mr. Lockwood. It is, as Tom said, initially there was legislation in '99. I know there was work prior to this, dating back to the early and mid-'90s with trying to go through the brownfield process and everything else on that site. I know there have been some frustrations, and it seems like it's taken a long time. I can only imagine that those frustrations are exponentialized in your view, because I know that you all have been working very hard to get this going. It's a pleasure to see it come to this level and to this step, and I wish you much success. And I'm glad that you've continued to pursue developing Lima Energy in the city of Lima. I really appreciate that.
Thank you,
Is there any further discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper. Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 21212 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 21312.
To authorize the mayor to enter into a contract with New Lima Housing for the future for housing maintenance training.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that ordinance 21312 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 21312 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Abstain.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper. Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 21312 has been passed on its first reading by a 6-0 vote with one abstention. Ordinance 21412.
To authorize the mayor to enter into a contract with New Lima Housing for the Future, Inc. for administrative services under the city's housing program.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that ordinance 21412 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 21412 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Abstain.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper. Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 21412 has been passed on its first reading by a 6-0 vote with one abstention. Ordinance 21512.
To authorize the mayor to enter into a contract with New Lima Housing for the Future to serve as a CHOTO for housing development.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that ordinance 21512 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 21512 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I might have been a little neglectful not to ask Ms. Odom to come up when the first ordinance came on, but the previous two and this one that we are currently considering, plus I think the next three that come up, are the work and the funding to support programs, and I think it's before us a little early this year, and I'd like Ms. Odom to, I think it's some good news.
Ms. Odom.
Mr. President, council members,
Ms. Adams. Yes, what you have before you tonight are actually the outcome of the approvals that you gave to the city's CDBG and home action plan early this summer. As you know, when we make that application, we then have to wait for the funds to come in for the beginning of the plan year. The plan year begins October 1. However, it's been very common that we don't receive those funds until much later, depending upon what's happening at the federal level with the disposition of funds. I'm pleased and was quite surprised, actually, to receive from HUD our contract agreements last week. So what that means is they are now ready to disperse the funds, which means we are then ready to enter into contract per the outline and allocations that you all approved in August. So what this means is, with your approval tonight of these contracts, we can then prepare to enter into contract with these organizations. Very shortly, we should be receiving our funds. I should comment that, yes, it is good news that we received them very quickly, and there were no further reductions in the allocations. Again, the total allocation of CDBG funds remain $946,551, and home funds remains at $251,197 in new dollars. Another common occurrence is that they tell us they've got that much, and then they send us the check, and it's a little short. So we're very pleased that those allocations remain the same. I want to thank Council and the Community and Economic Development Committee for all their hard work this summer to make this possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Abstain.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 215-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 6-0 vote with one abstention. Ordinance 216-12.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Lima Allen Council on Community Affairs to provide loan closing services and down payment assistance.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that ordinance number 21612 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 216-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I always be excited about this program and money to help out for closing this stuff, because it's helped out a lot of folks in our city of Lima. And you can just tell when the people get this money, they get to go have an opportunity to go to neighborhood association, get signed off. But this is great to do this. And also they have some counseling to help them out. And I'm glad to see this continue going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Is there any further discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 216-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 217-12.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Lima Allen Council on Community Affairs for housing counseling services.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that ordinance number 21712 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 217-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 217-12 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 218-12.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Lima Allen Council on Community Affairs to provide fair housing services.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams?
I move that ordinance number 21812 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 218-12 on its first reading. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Glenn?
I have a couple things to say on this. I know we all hear this on the radio about fair housing, so that's really great. And I know they've been doing an excellent job on taking care of. I've been hearing a lot of folks let me know they've been contacting LACA for fair housing service. And it's against the law to discriminate anyone for homes, and LACA have been doing a good job with fair housing there. I appreciate the work they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Is there any further discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Nieper, Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 21812 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Ordinance 21912.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Road State College for implementation of a manufacturing skills development program.
Mr. President,
Ms. Adams.
I move that ordinance number 21912 be passed on its first reading.
Second.
The motion and the second is to pass ordinance 21912 on its first reading. Is there any discussion? I'll have the clerk call the roll.
Mr. Glenn?
Yes.
Ms. Townsend?
Yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Mr. Neifer? Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Tevin?
Yes.
And Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Ordinance 21912 has been passed on its first reading by a 7-0 vote. Moving on to miscellaneous business. Mr. Glenn.
I won't stay but a few minutes tonight. First of all, I want to re-thank you, Ms. Adams, for a great job you did about the tree problem. This was an ongoing problem. And the day I got on city council, we had some root problem, and we got it fixed now. And thank you for your hard work and the compromise that you put together. Thank you again. I want to thank a lot. This past weekend, I had a meeting up in Columbus, Ohio, working on economic development. What can we bring to our neighborhoods? What kind of changes we can make to our neighborhood? And I was very excited. We had a guy from Jewel University in Los Angeles was the guest speaker, and he had explained some of the stuff we need to work on, we need to go after. So I was very excited and very positive, and some of the things that we want to work on for crime, and we'll be looking at a lot of that too, and what we need to bring for the kids, things for the kids to do in your community to make a positive neighborhood and a positive community. So it was outstanding. His last 3 days, I was there Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and I just want to thank the opportunity for going there and thank everyone who helped out to get me there. Also, we got Make a Difference Day coming up too. So we got a lot of little things we're going to get around, and some alleys I've been around looking at that we're going to try to make a difference in it. So we're going to be looking for some volunteers and again and help out on that. Also on Monday, October the 15th, at Sher Allen Center, the executive board are going to be sponsoring. We're going to have an opportunity to meet the Allen County School Board members and Superintendent Jill Ackerman for a town hall meeting. And the purpose of this meeting will be sharing information about the school levy. And it's very important that we pass this levy and continue improving the process of our school system here in education. No matter, and I know a question came about, I don't have no kids in school. You know, my kids are out, my grandkids are out, but we still got to keep the dream alive and the direction alive for folks. You know, and our young kids is our future. Also, again, I'd like to congratulate the White men for moving in step in that direction with the energy plant. That's very exciting all the time, and no matter what, like Mr. Nixon say, it is very long, but we're still moving. You know, it's got life with it, and we'll keep moving in that direction. Also, I want to thank King C and the board for doing an excellent job and volunteering, most of them volunteering down the Sher Allen Center. And we're going to need more volunteers to come aboard, and we're going to be doing some painting and different things we need to get done in there, some roof topping, and there's a lot of things I want to get done before winter time. So we ask for anyone for some volunteer work there. And don't forget that today was the last day of register to vote. I think today is the last day. We're still taking people to voting, and we had an increase this week. I appreciate everybody calling, and we still will take you guys around to vote there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Ms. Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. President. I had received a request from a resident of Sherwood who had had an incident with her lawnmower and the cap on the water connection. And I would like to refer that to the Utilities Committee as a moral obligation. And
Second.
yeah, do I need to do that?
The motion, the second is to refer the issue as described by Councilor Townsend to the Utilities Committee. Is there any discussion? Under discussion, I've got a question. Has it been through the Small Claims
Yes.
Advisory Committee? Okay. All right. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Mr. President, just for the record, it did go through our committee or commission, and we voted against it.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Motion passes. Mr. McLean?
Couple items this evening. First, Mr. President, I'd like to excuse Mr. Nieper tonight and authorize his pay.
Second.
Motion, the second, is to authorize the absence and salary of Councilor Nieper. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries.
And then the Northside Neighborhood Association holds its monthly meeting on the 16th at St. Gerard's at 7 p.m. in Parish Hall. So anyone gets to get out, first, second, third ward, the Northside's monthly meeting is at 7. And thirdly, I'd like to call a meeting of the utilities concerning the lawnmower incident at 6:15 on Monday the 15th. Just for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
All right, Mr. Lowe?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to place a meeting for communication number 8, which was concerning,
You don't need a motion.
I need to place it in Neighborhood Concerns Committee.
Communication number 8?
Yes.
It was referred in the motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. We
Sorry.
don't normally do it like that. Sorry. Couple other things. Eastside Neighborhood Association will meet tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at Forest Park Church. Neighbors perish because of a lack of knowledge and understanding of what's going on. Neighborhoods do. And I just encourage everybody to please come out and attend the meeting. You do not have to be from the east side of Lima, but you can come and let your voice be heard. Councilman Glenn mentioned the Make a Difference Day. This year, Eastside Neighborhood Association will team up with Midway East to make their project even greater. And I'm looking to help them and Ms. Adams with their partnership that we're going to have that day. I believe it's going to be a good day. We was talking about the Lima City Schools earlier. I believe there is a concert at Lima Senior tomorrow night and Wednesday night. It's a joint effort with all the junior highs that are going to come together and put on a nice concert. So let's support the arts and let these kids show you that they can shine. And it's not about what you hear, but you can testify that you've seen the good that the city schools is doing. And the last thing that I would like to do is, just like we had some councilmen and council ladies who supported the Lima Warriors, the Lima Explosion will be having a preseason game on October the 27th. They are now under the direction of Mr. Louis Shine, and you can get season tickets for $75. That's 20 games you get to go to for $75. You can contact them on Facebook and like them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Mr. Tevin?
A few things this evening. One, I see that Jill Ackerman is still here. Did you bring any yard signs tonight? Okay, I just want one. Thank you. I didn't have one yet. I was gonna.
Yeah, I want one too.
You're going for a record.
Yeah,
75 signs in your yard?
That's
this
right.
year, or what?
I'm glad you noticed. They work.
They working. If he looking at them,
It's obvious they work. John's looking. The other thing, I'd like to commend the Public Works Department when I look at the number of projects that they've taken on. When you look at the Spring Street, the conversion to two-way, and the reconstruction of the street, it's absolutely beautiful. Elm Street is now two-way, and in the Fourth Ward we have Elm between Woodlawn and Cable Road, which is nearing the completion of that reconstruction, and I mean it just makes a world of difference. And the residents really appreciate it. One concern that the residents in that stretch of Elm Street have when Elm Street opens back up, and I've discussed this with Howard Elstro, is truck traffic. The street will be more attractive to truckers is the concern. There is a truck route, there's a state route that would turn at Woodlawn and head out 117. And I want to just publicly express the concern that the neighbors have there was a baseline study performed of the amount of truck traffic that went beyond Woodlawn previously. And that will be monitored, and hopefully when this street opens up, there will be improved signage to direct the trucks to take the state route. So that's something that the residents have their antennas up over, and I will also, and I appreciate, the support that the Public Works Department has given and any help they can give to help control that. But I look around the city, if you look at those projects that are going on, it really is making a difference in not only the appearance, in the flow of traffic through the city. It's all infrastructure improvements that are welcome and much appreciated. So Howard, kudos to you and your department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevin. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. President. A few things. I'd like to ask Councilor Lowe on the meeting you were calling for next Monday.
It's next Monday, October 15th, 7:15.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
Threw me
you.
off when we started talking.
7:15, up and down 6:15.
Utilities is 6:15.
Oh, utilities is 6:15.
6:15, 7:15.
What's yours on?
Neighborhood concerns with the LACNIP.
Oh, okay. Okay.
If I may, Mr. President, I need to call a meeting for next Monday as well. Community and Economic Development Committee. And our meeting will be at 5:15. It'll be a continuing discussion on what's already in the Committee of Civil Penalties and Fines on Code Enforcement. I know there's been a lot been said about Make a Difference Day. The date is October 27th, which is on a Saturday. Check agencies, neighborhood associations. In the neighborhood notes for October, there was a listing of neighborhood associations and some of their projects that they hope to do that day. Midway East is going to have a dumpster behind Meat City from 9 to noon, and they'll have their annual chili cook-off that day as well. But if you have the time and are able, please get out and support these agencies and neighborhood associations if at all possible. Also, Midway East regular meeting will be next Thursday, a week from Thursday, on the 18th at 7 p.m. And finally, LACNIP Good Neighbor Award nomination deadline is October 18th. And you can nominate anyone that you feel deserves the recognition and/or business as well. And if you have someone, forms are down here in the City Hall, at the county office, but you can also call the neighborhood support specialist at 419-221-5177 to pass on that information or get a form sent to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. I just have, I guess, one thing I want to mention, and we, I'm glad that we unanimously supported the Lima City Schools through the resolution. But there's another school district that does reach in significantly into the city of Lima limits. And that's the Elida School District, and I know that they also have an income tax for the schools that's on the ballot. And I want to go on record as supporting that, and I have been very reserved in supporting the income tax for schools, but I understand why they are doing it, and I understand the reasons for it. And again, it still comes down to the principle that we are building for our future, okay? So I just want to go on record as supporting that too, because it does involve basically everything north of Robb Avenue, which is a significant part of the second ward and a significant part of the first ward, I believe, is in the Elida School District. So sometimes people get confused about how those districts overlie the governmental boundaries, and I believe that that's the other district that has a significant makeup in the city of Lima that also has a levy. You know, voting no now is just shooting yourself in the foot, okay? You're going to pay for it in the end, down the road. Or we can invest a small amount now and reap the dividends down the road. And I just feel that strongly about the schools. As a product of public education, my children are products of public education. That education is there if you want to reach out and grab it. And if you make your children go to school and absorb what's there to be absorbed, the education is there. And I will always be a supporter of public education. So I've got nothing further. Ms. Townsend?
Mr. President, I move that Lima City Council adjourn until October 22nd at 7 p.m. in these chambers.
Second.
The motion and the second is Lima City Council adjourn until October 22nd at 7 p.m. And we're not going to take an 11-month sabbatical, sorry. At 7 p.m. in these chambers. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? The motion carries. We are adjourned.